Hello everybody, this is Count MRVHS and welcome back to another Wainrider Wednesday where we take a look at the upcoming mod for Rome Total War's Alexander expansion, the original game, not the remaster. This is a mod called Total War Wainriders, set in the Third Age conflict of the invasion of the Wainriders out of the East, and occupying, as you can tell, basically the whole of the known parts of Middle-earth. Now, in this episode of Wainrider Wednesday, I want to do something a little bit differently to kind of break the pattern we've established of looking at faction starts for different factions on the campaign map. And this time I want to take a little time and look at the ways you can get over the Misty Mountains in this mod. And we're going to use the faction Durin's Folk, which we spoke about last week. So if you want to find that episode on the campaign preview for essentially the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm, you can find that on the channel, as well as all the other Wainrider preview videos and other Middle-earth 4th Age mod related content. In some ways, though, this will be a bit of a double preview because I'm going to be using armies to show these passes. And that will necessitate me clicking on armies, and that will show some of the portraits and some of the unit cards as well. And those are things that, that Valor has worked very hard on over the past several years, I guess. And so this will be a little bit of a preview of those things. I haven't consulted this with anybody. I've essentially gone rogue at this point. So hopefully this is fine. Hopefully this is fine. Now, what you're looking at here is the current setup of the mod, and there are 6 Dwarven armies just stationed around Khazad-dûm at the moment. Now, of course, this is not how things will be in the final version, and this is an excellent opportunity for me to remind everybody that what you see here is a work in progress. This is just stuff that we're throwing in, and so unit placement, all sorts of things can be changed, and that includes resource placement as well as pretty much everything you may see on the map. So basically take this with a grain of salt. But we've done a lot of work on the campaign map lately, and so that's kind of why we're showing this stuff off. But let's first point out the fact that there is actually a proper Redhorn pass, which I had neglected to mention in the preview for Durin's Folk. So if we just click pretty much any one of these armies, you can see that there is, in fact, a pass to the north, essentially, of Khazad-dûm. If we take, for example, Hilding of Akarn, and again, names are another thing that we will certainly be working on and changing, and we move him up here, you can see that it's actually possible to get through the area while sort of on rebel territory, at least territory that begins in rebel hands. And so you'll be going around Moria with those kind of mountains in the way of the settlement itself, so that you're not going to be blocked from marching over the Redhorn Pass. And so now we're down into Holland from where he started, roughly around here in the Gladden Heights. Of course, Khazad-dûm itself will offer a way to get essentially through the mountains. This is kind of the under-mountain route, and that would, of course, necessitate that you own the settlement in order to pass that way. The Redhorn Pass, though, is really very useful for other factions who are not playing the Dwarves. As long as you stay away from the settlement here, which should be pretty straightforward, you can walk around to the north of it. And that means if you're playing as the High Elves, you can send an army up here into Holland and up towards Rivendell relatively straightforwardly, and vice versa. And if you're playing really any faction and you want to just traverse the Misty Mountains, this is one option for you without having to conquer a settlement. Now, to the south in the Misty Mountains, there are no passes connecting east and west. And there's a few pretty reasonable reasons for that. One is that none are known in the lore, and the other is that there's just simply not a lot of factions in the area. We've got Fangorn Forest on the eastern flank of the southern Misty Mountains, and then we've got what would later become Dunland on the west, and there's really no reason for these places to be traversed by any playable factions in the mod. But what about further north? Well, let's take a stroll here. We'll pass a few turns and move our men around and see what that looks like. Now, of course, if you cross this border here, you're going to be in Elven territory, in Lorien. And so that's something you may want to avoid. So instead, there's another possibility of going around to the northern side. You can stay off of Elven territory. And this province here, Gladden Heights, sort of loops around the mountains, sticking fairly close to them. But we can move through here, and then we'll pass a few turns and see where we may end up. And in the intervening turn, the Aothiad looks like they've advanced into the Gladden Heights, so we'll see how that may change things. Now, there's a slight area over here, but you can't actually progress beyond that point. So the actual pass is a little bit further to the north. Here's the settlement. Now, this is one of the orc holds, and we'll take a closer look at this settlement type on the campaign map when we do the orc preview for that faction. But here we'll see that this is going to somewhat command the pass here. So that's going to be a bit of a problem for us. We'll just have to do an auto-resolve cheat to get past this point. Alright, that settlement taken, we can see now how the path progresses. We'll get up here into the mountains, and giving a march order beyond indicates that you can actually cross over here down just into the northern reaches of Holland, I suppose. And this is going to be well south of Rivendell, which is situated up here, and that would allow you just another option getting across the mountains. Now, a pass in this region is not, as far as I know, attested in the lore, but it is another option, and it's one of the instances of a general sort of policy we have in the development of the mod, and that is somewhat increasing things like passes and river crossings so as to decrease the importance of a few critical choke points. From the perspective of 4th Age Total War, the mod, which really laid a lot of the groundwork for Wainriders, of course, there are a few really critical choke points on that map. One of those would, of course, be Moria, as it is the only pass through the Misty Mountains in this region, and then the other would be the High Pass, which is just north of Rivendell. And so the addition of another pass here, kind of midway between, just makes things a little less predictable, gives the AI perhaps a little more options as well, and makes things maybe more variable for the player. But let's go back through this direction again and move up the eastern side of the Misty Mountains just to see how that would look. Again, if you're playing as Durin's folk, you're probably going to be focused in this direction largely, and there's perhaps not a huge reason for you to head onto the western flanks until you get well into the north, where you may want to attack Angmar and the mountains up here. So let's go back to the east, and we'll see that there is a couple of crossings along the Gladden River, the very upper reaches of it, again giving the dwarves and of course other factions that corridor closer to the mountains to avoid the requirement that you get out into the lowlands here. Leaving the region of Gladden Heights, we'll now be stepping onto the territory of the eastern Hithaglir foothills. And so again, we've got a few more provinces added here, not only to give these extra corridors, but also to sort of give the orcs and the dwarves something to do, of course. These new provinces are going to mean new settlements, and they're mostly going to be orcish or dwarven-style settlements, as you've seen. And here we come to the High Pass, and this is going to be a little bit of a change for those of you familiar with 4th Age Total War. In 4th Age, the High Pass, which goes right over here, again, Rivendell is located right down here, and the High Pass is this passage through the Misty Mountains, and there was a stronghold located right in the midst of it. So if you wanted to cross the Misty Mountains, you had to occupy that fort. It was initially held by like a full stack of orcs and trolls and wargs, and then other factions would fight over it. In this version, things are quite a bit different. The stronghold, the settlement essentially that controls this pass, is not actually located in the middle of it at all. It is this province here that controls the territory. And so as we can see, it's possible for you to move right past it. And that means it'll make for a little more of an active map, potentially, as it's not an essential thing that you hold a settlement in order to move through a province. And at this point, I think we will go ahead and head west on the western side of the Misty Mountains. You'll notice a couple of things, again, differences from 4th Age Total War. In 4th Age, Rivendell was largely protected and almost entirely safe from attack. There was only this one pass to the south of it, or a crossing rather, and to the north of it was the river. In this version, though, it's possible that our Dwarven army could go right to Rivendell in a single turn because we've added another crossing, sort of in the high ground. We may get a glimpse of Rivendell here, and we'll certainly take a closer look at those elven settlements in the High Elves preview video. But for now, we're going to stick close to the Misty Mountains and just take a look at where we can go from here. Here's one of our orcish settlements, Torog. So we'll move up here and see how we can approach it. So giving an attack order on the settlement of Torog, you can see where we would go from here. We'd have to stick fairly close to the mountains and attack it from uphill. So once again, we've basically passed through from Khazad-dûm all the way up the eastern side of the Misty Mountains, across the High Pass, and now crossing into what would be the territory of Angmar. All right, we've got Torog under siege here. Let's just go ahead and cheat our win. And with that victory, we can see where we would go from here. Again, we've got this, the Ettendales region hews very closely to the western flanks of the Misty Mountains. And if we were to take our army outside of it, we can march right through here. There is no other pass across the Misty Mountains until we get up around Mount Gundabad. But we can see we're entering or approaching Angmar's territory, the Angmar Dales, and then the Ettenmoors down to our southwest. And so here we are just outside Mount Gundabad. Of course, this is the capital of the Orcish faction, at least initially, and it commands a rather more important spot with regard to these passes over the Misty Mountains. Unlike the stronghold that commands the High Pass, or even Moria, you would need to take possession of Gundabad in order to pass through it into the east or vice versa. There is an alternate route. If you're playing Angmar, it would be good to know that you can go to the northern side of the mountains of Angmar and kind of down through various passes in the Grey Mountains. We'll take a closer look at those when we visit the Orcish faction in another campaign preview. But in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this look at the Misty Mountains and the ways that it is possible to move your armies around them. And this is one of the features that I really enjoy, because when you're playing as a Dwarven faction, sometimes it can be hard to find lore-friendly things to do. But in this case, as we've seen, it's possible for you to pick up 4 or 5 Orc holds or Dwarven settlements just going north from Khazad Dûm. So it gives you a lot more to do, and you can do it all without accidentally becoming Lord of the Anduin Vales or taking a bunch of territory in Eriador, for example. So our next Wainrider Wednesday is liable to get us back on track for the campaign previews. We'll be looking at some other faction, but until then, of course, you can take a look at all other Wainriders related previews and content on the channel here. And until the next one, take care.